So I'd like to welcome everybody tonight to a cannabis forum, and specifically about unlicensed cannabis. And we are joined by a number of people. But first, let me just note that this is sponsored by Health Kitchen Neighborhood Coalition. We are a group that was founded in October of 2020 in response to a serious public safety issue regarding the concentration of COVID hotels in our district in the West 30s and 40s. And we have come together as a group of neighborhood block associations and Hell's Kitchen, the 29th Street Association, a number of not-for-profits, Hartley House, Covenant House, business improvement districts, Hudson Yards, Hell's Kitchen Alliance, and the Garment Center Alliance, and the Garment Center bid, and a number of small businesses. We have been meeting weekly since October 2020, and really have focused on public safety in the neighborhood and the changes that happen post-COVID. One of the issues that our members representing block associations from 34th to 57th Streets on the west side and down around Madison Square, and the two business improvement districts have really dealt with unlicensed cannabis shops. So just for information for everyone, number one, that the use of cannabis recreationally was legalized March 31st in 2021. And the sale from licensed retailers in April of 22. In our district, we have no licensed shops. They are all unlicensed. And they are not doing any sales with any oversight from OCM and have a potential for contaminants in the goods that are sold. The shops are all cash-based. They have lax security. They're susceptible to robbery. They have packaging for young children, cartoons, selling candy, food, and soda to entice young adults and children to walk in. All of this is prohibited under a legalization law. And it is impossible to walk through any part of our neighborhood not finding an unlicensed shop. Up 9th Avenue, 8th Avenue, down in the West 20s. And shops are located too close to schools and churches where they're not permitted. So it has led, unfortunately, to a series of public safety issues around them. I'll just give you a rough idea of issues we've experienced in the past 4 or 5 months. On 128, an employee at Smoke City, 710 9th Avenue, was shot in the leg following a dispute with customers. 429, shots were fired on West 44th between 9th and 10th after individuals left an unlicensed dispensary on 8th Avenue and 42nd Street. 426, 23, there was a fire at Hell's Kitchen's Clouds, 346 West 52nd Street. Took over 100 firefighters to put out and caused damage to the apartments above and the adjacent Korean restaurant. 429, a man was shot twice outside of Forbidden Cannabis, 652 9th Avenue. And 429 at Kiss My Smoke Shop, 423 West 34th, was robbed at gunpoint with 3 suspects fleeing the scene. We very much are interested in the state's management, the DA's management, all the law enforcement's management of this issue. Now it affects our district and our neighborhood. And we've heard a great deal from parents of children of local schools that there's a lot of conflict in front of these shops and a lot of free samples being handed out, unbelievably. I want to turn it over. I didn't introduce myself, Joe Restuccia, moderator of Health Kitchen Neighborhood Coalition, and turn it over to Travis Rogers from West 42nd Street. Talk about the current laws.
Thank you, Joe. As Joe has masterfully laid out the series of issues that are in our community, I'd like to point out how these issues are not compliant to the actual laws that are in place to regulate the proper smoke shops, and cannabis shops, and how these unregulated shops are actually operating without the proper protocols. So, according to guidance for the adult use retail dispensaries, pursuant to Section 85 of the cannabis law, there are certain security requirements that are supposed to be in place, such as a security guard at the front door, preventions against theft, preventions against unauthorized entrance, preventions against loitering, locks on the perimeter of doors, safe cash storage and handling, and a perimeter alarm. If you do a cursory surveillance walk through our neighborhood, you'll see that none of those things are in place. In fact, members of our coalition, when they've walked into shops and observed no security, open doors, and minors in the shops. And in fact, as Joe pointed out, oftentimes these shops actually market to minors. With the aforementioned timeline incidents and the lack of security, we've also seen a rise in crime in the area. As of June 7th, 2023, the change to the state budget have allowed OCM to take action against unlicensed cannabis shops, not depending on law enforcement, with fines up to $20,000 per day. Now, the current regulations do not prohibit operators who are busted under these laws from getting licenses again in the future, which is a slap in the face to folks who actually are operating by the regulations and actually getting licenses. So there's actually no repercussions for opening up a legal shop and operating illegally within our neighborhoods. Additionally, there's an equity initiative involved in the cannabis laws. So for folks who actually fought hard to actually legalize cannabis in our community and actually repair some of the harm that has been done to communities that have been most impacted by some of the draconian drug laws, there's supposed to be laws in place to actually cater to those communities and get them licenses. If you do a cursory look around our community, you'll see that the communities that have been most impacted by the draconian drug laws of the past are not the ones getting the licenses. We have various other folks coming in that have money, that have been able to open up shops within the community and actually operate without punishment. The regulatory framework that we established under the cannabis law also does not allow for us to actually properly tax people here, tax these shops, right? So they're operating a cash business without taxation. So they're operating outside the tax structure, which is limiting the amount of funds we can bring into our neighborhood, bring into the community, and bring into the city. So as you can see, these shops are operating unregulated. They present a number of safety precautions and safety issues to our neighborhood. They operate outside the equity nature of the law that was put in place, and they operate outside the scope of actually being able to be taxed and bring revenue to the city. So overall, they operate as a nuisance.
I just want to note that we have currently 35 attendees of the public here, and we laid out the issue at hand. I'd like to introduce now the participants for our panel tonight. And I'll go around one by one, call you, just if you could just say who you are and what you are specifically doing in that office. Starting with Eric.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, Joe. Pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for inviting us. My name is Eric Straza. I am your community coordinator at the Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg's office. I work in our community partnerships unit, and I can go into a little bit more of our work when it comes to our time to speak, but I will hand it off to Mike.
Thanks so much, Eric. My name is Mike Mead. I'm a senior advisor for government and external affairs at the Manhattan DA's office. And the third in our trio is Rick Costello. Rick, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Rick Costello. I'm an assistant DA, and I'm counsel to the civil litigation unit. And part of what we're talking about tonight is what the civil litigation unit in the Manhattan DA's office does.
And then Captain Williams.
Good evening, everyone. Captain Maurice Williams from NYPD Chief of Patrol's office, representing Chief John Shao, and I oversee community programs, Community Link, and Chief of Patrol's office.
Jason.
Yes, my name is Jason Salmon. I work for the Office of Cannabis Management. I'm the Director of External Affairs, and what that entails is community relations work, also legislative affairs. For example, when we needed the powers to actually go in and close these shops and issue fines, et cetera, because we didn't have the power before to do so, we had to pass a law to actually get that done. Also intergovernmental affairs, which is dealing with local municipalities. As we all know, this is a state law. So for example, we're traveling all across the state, Long Island, Buffalo, different parts of upstate, spreading the message, and also operations. So basically external affairs is the front facing portion of the agency, and we have to meet people where they're at. And that's our basic job.
Christine.
My name is Christine Gorman. I'm the president of the West 55th Street Block Association and a member of the Hell's Kitchen Neighborhood Coalition.
I just want to note for our format for tonight, we'll have the speakers speak about specific items one at a time. I'll be calling on them. For people in the public attending, The chat is disabled, but please put your questions in the Q&A and we'll be directing those questions to the speakers as they speak, and you have issues or questions, something that they've raised. Also want to welcome to our meeting tonight. We have Assembly Member Linda Rosenthal, Assembly Member Tony Simone, and Council Member Eric Botcher. So let's start out with Office of Cannabis Management, and maybe you could just sort of, Jason, just tell us what that is to begin with, so people understand.
And I actually, am I allowed to share my screen? Because I have a whole
Yes, you
presentation
can.
to actually give.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, the Office of Cannabis Management was created by the MRTA, in which I'll preface this, a lot of us at the agency worked really, including Chris Alexander, our executive director, were heavily involved with either the advocacy or the drafting of the legislation.
And it's a New York State agency, which is.
It is a New York State agency, and my presentation explains all of the nooks and crannies. So I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, does everybody see this?
Yes, just make it perfect.
Great, okay. So, Joe, as you stated, March 31st of 2021, we passed the MRTA, the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act. This is exactly what actually created our office. So we are a new office. We are still hiring. We are about half capacity to date. So, we're trying to get a lot done with not necessarily not the staff we'll have in a year from now once everyone is hired. So what is the cannabis law? So it's really changed the framework of how we treat cannabis, not just in the city, but in the state of New York. And unlike a lot of other laws that have been passed in other states, the social equity portion is a major part of this bill and was baked into the bill. A lot of the times, other states have tried to do social equity after the law is passed, and we've seen that has not worked. Economic development. As stated before, we want to empower the folks that have been oppressed by draconian laws. We want folks to understand if they have been impacted, that they can come and participate in this market. We're a budding agency, no pun intended, obviously. Our chair is Chairwoman Tremaine Wright. We actually had a board meeting today, so that was online and they are accessible. The minutes are accessible as well on our website, cannabis.ny.gov. As I said, we've been growing since October 2021. Our executive director is Chris Alexander. Just to note, Chris and I met about maybe 8 to 10 years ago, just working on expungement and decriminalization. This was before the MRTA was even contemplated. So just to say that the people at the agency and all of us really care about what we do and we're passionate about it. As I said, we're still hiring. I'm actually hiring about 5 positions across the state, regional reps, so that I don't have to, travel the amount that I do, and my team doesn't either. And if anybody wants to apply for a job, it's cannabis.ny.gov/careers. So as I said, the MRTA created our agency, the Office of Cannabis Management. What we oversee is adult use recreational, medical cannabis, and hemp. I want to point out that our medical cannabis program was begun in 2014. So we've had medical for some time now. And that was under the purview of the Department of Health, and also was the hemp program as well. So that now has been switched due to the legislation passing, and we oversee all 3 departments. These are the conditional licenses to date. So we're talking about 279 licensed cultivators. These are all over the state, Long Island, Buffalo, Rochester, etc. We also have processors, and just to let everybody know, processors are the ones that, if we're dealing with tinctures edibles, vapes, things of that nature, non-flower. They're processing the flower to be those products. And so we have a card licenses, and I would like to state that card is our first retail dispensary program. And what card, the mission of card is to empower people that have business ownership experience, but you also had to have a cannabis conviction, right? So you had to have a cannabis conviction under the old penal code of 221. And you also had to have 2 years of net profit owning your own business. It didn't have to be exorbitant amount of profit, but we needed to see that you could stay in the black and run a profitable business. There are also 10 not-for-profits that have been licensed as well. Our first shop that was opened, our first legal shop, of course, is Housing Works. So another criteria of the conditional adult use retail dispensary licensing program, the other type of applicant that could apply was a not-for-profit that dealt with groups that we were also trying to help, right? If they did certain community service in their work, providing housing, providing criminal justice, legal services, things of that nature. So Housing Works these are pictures of this is Chris, he's making the first purchase. And that happened, about I would say 6 months back. These are the cannabis sales to date. They have to be updated a little bit, but generally these are the correct numbers and figures. What you'll see here is that in other states, edibles, tinctures, beverages, things of that nature, the concentrates and the vapes, that's really what drives the market. And that's really what people are buying. Here, it's a little bit different. We're seeing that actually flower and pre-rolls really are competing and make up for 50% of the sales. Licenses and social equity. So as I said, social equity is baked into our bill. Here are the 9 licenses under the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act. I want to, very much highlight that what we've done is block vertical integration. This is supposed to be a market that empowers small businesses and people that have been directly impacted by cannabis prohibition. The only license here that you can participate from seed to sale is the micro business. And if anybody knows the craft beer business, it's sort of similar to that. It's people that want to start their own brands, which a lot of our legacy folks have their own brands. And when I say legacy, just so we're not playing any inside baseball, I mean that, anybody who put food on their table simply due to cannabis prior to legalization, right? So, and we are doing our best to try to transition those folks into the legal market so they continue to put food on their table for their families. So again, these are the 9 licenses. There's cultivation, nurseries, processors, retail dispensary, on-site consumption. A lot of these licenses will you'll be able to apply for these licenses in September, October. I don't give exact dates anymore because it's not the best thing to do when you have an ever-changing market and things are always moving. Again, I talked about vertical integration and why we have developed this 2-tier market. It's so that we don't have big tobacco. It's so that we have a number of small businesses providing for their families, creating jobs, union jobs at that. And it's a fair market. So making sure that we do the right thing. Social and economic equity, as I said, is built into the MRTA. There is a goal of 50% of the overall licenses being issued to social equity applicants. The 5 social equity groups of the MRTA are MWBEs, service disabled veterans, women, CDIs. CDIs are if you're a community that's been disproportionately impacted. We have data, which it was very hard to collect this data. But we all know where the neighborhoods and most of the arrests have happened, but we needed something on paper. So we know exactly where the arrest happened, and we are going to prioritize those areas. So if you can prove that you grew up in a CDI, you will be prioritized over someone who isn't a social equity applicant and not from a CDI. Also, small farmers. One of the first things we did was transition a lot of our hemp farmers who weren't doing that well, some of them were, some of them weren't, into transitioning into growing cannabis. As everyone knows, the city is not the only place in New York. We have other regions that cultivation is key, right? I can tell you, I grew up right here in Brooklyn, and growing up, I knew more dealers than I knew cultivators, right? But if you go upstate, farming is a huge commodity. It's a huge business, and we really wanted to help distressed farmers. Our Cannabis Advisory Board, I want to highlight that is very different than the Cannabis Control Board. The Cannabis Advisory Board is 13 members from across the state. They're going to give guidance and support, but I really want to highlight that they're going to figure out where this tax revenue goes, right? So 40% overall of the sales from cannabis sales are going straight back into the communities that have been disproportionately impacted by cannabis prohibition. 40% to education, community grants. For example, if you wanted to run small business development programming in your community, you could apply for a grant with us and potentially be awarded monies to actually run that programming in your respective communities. Also, drug treatment and public health education. You know, depending on where you are, we have a big opioid issue in this state and across this country. And, you know, we understand that. We also understand, we actually just put out a report, DOH in partnership with OCM, that shows that when you have legalization in states of cannabis, that opioid usage drops. We've had veterans come up to us, said that they've been weaned off of opioids actually with the usage of cannabis. So public health is a big consideration for us. One of also the first things we did was we had, you know, billboards, mass media buys. So we had billboards on the train, and not to drive while you're high. As soon as you came off the Jackie Robinson, there's a big billboard over there. So public health is also a big portion of what we do. And I will stop right there.
Yes, Jason, thank you so much for that. It gives us a big overview, which is really what we need. And important also for you to tell us that, in fact, you're dealing with the enforcement part of it now, because we're trying to get the proper licenses to happen and the revenue coming from that, not the unlicensed folks making out to everyone's detriment.
The unlicensed folks, and let's be clear, these aren't legacy folks either. They're not people that, it's not your local guy or person, right? This is a short money game play for folks that, you know, have ready real estate that can open up very quickly. And Travis, as you said before, this takes away from the people we're really trying to help. But this wasn't anticipated, right? You know, initially OCM wasn't supposed to be dealing with enforcement, right? And we just have a huge issue right now that now we've been given the power through the legislature. It was passed in the budget, where we actually can issue fines and do the inspections, make the seizures. But I will say that it's not a quick process, right? And we're gonna need, the Manhattan DA's office is here. They've been very helpful. We're gonna need NYPD, because there are still 222 under the penal code. There are still ways for NYPD to shut these places down as well. So we're just gonna need all hands on deck, to be honest, because it is a big problem, but we do take it very serious.
Which is a great segue to the Manhattan DA, and be mindful of time. Eric or Michael or Rick, please lead off. Thank you. And remember, to the public, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A and we'll ask them at the end. Yes.
Great. Thanks so much, Joe. Really appreciate it. Jason, so great hearing from you. Just wanted to quickly start off introducing myself again. Once again, I'm Eric Straza. I'm your community coordinator at the Manhattan DA's office. Like I said, I work in the community partnerships unit, and a lot of my job entails going to community meetings, events just like this one, speaking to community members about their concerns and the issues that they see in their neighborhood. So you're probably used to hearing from me with regards to our work in the unlicensed cannabis shop space. But another one of our goals in community partnerships is to promote and increase access to our office. So with this in mind, I'm really excited to be joined by Mike and Rick, two members of our office who are directly involved in the work that we're doing in that space. Before I pass it off to Mike, I just wanted to highlight that this is something, obviously, you're going to hear that our work in part relies a lot on community support, feedback, and communication in general. So just wanted to say that our door is always open. I know I can't put my contact information into the chat, but I'm sure that Joe can help you reach out if you ever need anything, if you have any questions. And we just look forward to working with everyone to address the issue of the unlicensed cannabis shops moving forward. So with that, I'll hand it off to Mike.
Thanks so much, Eric. I'm really just going to start by saying we share your concerns about these illegal cannabis shops, these smoke shops. They're completely undermining the intent of the cannabis law, and they're a real public safety issue, as Joe and Travis have mentioned, and also the public health concerns. But what are in these products? We don't even know, and we have our kids, whether it's I have kids, DA Bragg has kids. I mean, we are all very concerned about this issue. And, that being said, it is also important to note that the cannabis law does not give prosecutors additional enforcement tools to address this particular issue. In fact, the law was really intended to do the opposite, was to really take the criminal penalties away from the sale and possession in most cases, which is really was what took the DAs out of the equation of sort of being the primary enforcement, and that was intentional. So, the new enforcement mechanism, as Jason has mentioned, is really the OCM, the Office of Cannabis Management, and also the Attorney General's office, because of this new change in the law, has new authorities. But the question really is, I think, on everyone's mind, and is very understandable, why can't you just shut this down? If there was a legal bar that opened up on the corner of West 55th or West 45th or wherever in your neighborhood, the state liquor authority could come in, put the padlock on the door, put the sticker on the window, and say, closed out of business, at least for now. The state OCM really hasn't had that authority in the same way up until recently. So I think until June
7th of this year.
There you go. So it is very recent. So as we think about what has happened in the past, listen, there has been the enforcement tools have not existed in the way that they have existed in the liquor analogy, and hopefully that is changing. So where we've seen this incredible spike in these illegal smoke shops over the last couple of years, hopefully with this kind of multi-faceted approach of OCM having more tools, the DA's office, the city with NYPD using these different tools, I think we're going to start to see a decline over the next 6 months to a year as more pressure comes on and more tools for enforcement are come down on this industry. And I think maybe some of you have seen the announcement from yesterday of 11 shops, which I think Jason mentioned this too. These aren't mom and pop shops that are opening up. These are people who are in coordination, have multiple shops. So the one person in our enforcement action yesterday had 11 different shops, mostly in Manhattan, some in the Hell's Kitchen area in the Upper West Side, and a few in Queens. So this is a sophisticated illicit market that we need additional tools, and we're starting to get these additional enforcement tools. But the question of how are we going to shut these down? I think that there are essentially, I'll also say this, that even without the additional enforcement tools given to the DA's office, we are still, because we sort of see and we've heard from the community, have tried to think very creatively how we address this issue from our seat. there are going to be criminal cases, because of violence or because of, the amount of cannabis that is seized from a certain location. But we have to think more creatively, and we have to sort of dig in and kind of figure out the different tools that we can use to shut this down. But when you think about it as like, how are we actually going to do this? So there are basically 4 different lanes for enforcement of how you can shut this down. I think, Jason has talked a little bit, and maybe you can talk a little bit more about the Office of Cannabis Management, now the AG's new authority to go in, to do investigations, to get temporary or permanent injunctions with the court. I think that is essentially the beginning of the padlock method. And that is a new development, which will hopefully pay dividends in the coming months. So that's the one. That is, I would say, the most promising new development. The second is the city can file a public nuisance abatement suit. And that, again, this is a civil suit, not a criminal suit, where the NYPD or the sheriff's office does 3 different investigations. They hand that over to NYPD legal or the law department, and they can bring a nuisance abatement suit with the city. Again, that takes time because 1, you have to do the investigations, and 2, you have to go before a judge in a civil courtroom and sort of make the argument, and that can take time. That can take 3 to 6 months from beginning to end. Then there is the 2 buckets that we've been focused on. So the third of the lanes is really our authority under the real property law that we have sort of dug into and said, we want to use this authority that has existed for 100+ years. Maybe Rick can go into it some more. That has been used in the past. And what essentially it is the real property law allows law enforcement to force the hand of a landlord to evict an illegal business. And Rick will talk more about that. But this has been on, like I said, on the books for 100 years, give or take. In the 80s and 90s, it was used to get out drug dealers in apartment buildings. So again, it is the law enforcement saying to a landlord, if you don't evict, we will. And Rick can talk about how that has worked and what we need to get that going at the DA's office. And then, so the first 3 are really about using enforcement tools that are in the state statutes. And the fourth bucket, I just want to take a second to talk about, because it focuses on the one group that is profiting off the conduct here, but has probably received the least attention. And that is the landlords. You think about who is profiting here. It's the store owners, it's the suppliers, and I think can't really talk about ongoing investigations, but we're sort of looking into the suppliers of the illegal cannabis shops. But also the third category are the landlords that are profiting from the rent that they're receiving from these commercial spaces. And we have been really ramping up our outreach to landlords to let them know that we believe that there is illegal business going on in their buildings, and that this illegal business is in violation of the lease agreement that they have with these tenants in buildings across Manhattan, really across the city. So those are really the 4 ways that we are sort of focused. 2 of them are really sort of in our bucket. But those are really the ways that we're going to begin to chisel away at this problem sort of going forward. And Jason mentioned this, in most of the instances, these are not an easy fix. It is not a 24-hour, put the padlock on. It just, the law isn't written that way in most of these instances to be able to do that. And it's, in most instances, it also isn't criminal, it's civil. So it is just sort of, I understand the frustration. I think we all sort of can feel the frustration and the question of why can't we just shut these down? It is working through the enforcement tools that we have. So maybe with that, I'll pass it off to Rick, and he can talk about our authority and how we're using it under the real property law.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting us because as has kind of come through this, I hope, and I'm going to specifically say it, input from the community is very important for us in using the tools that we have, the limited tools we have to attack this problem. As Mike said, the new legislation didn't really give us a role, but DA Bragg decided to, this was an important issue, and we would try to do what we could to help out. And in our office, for the most part, these civil matters have been handed off to our civil litigation unit, and I'm counsel to that unit. So we get involved in two ways in that unit. The first is community complaints. And what we do is, if we get a complaint from the community, we send a letter to the landlord. Now, the landlord, we'll talk about the landlords in a second in terms of what they can do, but we'll send a letter to the landlord. The second way we get involved is if law enforcement has evidence for us. So if law enforcement can provide evidence for us, then we can write to the landlord and order the landlord to start a civil eviction proceeding under the real property law. And we've done that on a number of occasions, and you worry about the timing, but as I explained to one landlord today, and the landlords are constantly calling me, a lot of landlords are very supportive of this initiative in terms of they don't want the illegal sellers in their space. It is true they can make money off them, but for a lot of them, they really don't want it. One particular one I talked to today in this area, physical area, in your area, said, I've got a legal cannabis seller who has a license who wants to use my space. What can I do to get rid of the illegal person? So, and he's gone so far to do what we aren't recommending, which is he purchased. And I explained to him how he can now, as a result of the purchase he made, put an affidavit in and have his attorney file a petition to evict that tenant. So they said, we get the complaints, we notify landlords. We get evidence, we notify landlords. They have to evict under the real property law. And that's been successful in the sense that we've had some evictions, not through the court, but after the filing. Sometimes the landlord and tenant make an agreement for the tenant to leave. And we've had many, I think now we're up to about 10 filings against tenants. And we provide, if we have evidence, we provide the evidence. But if we don't have the evidence, the landlords are in a bind. Landlords who want to evict, they can file a proceeding outside of the real property law if the defendant is violating the terms of his lease. But if that's selling illegal cannabis, they need evidence of illegal cannabis, and that sometimes involves having a marijuana field test for that. But what some have done, some have creatively looked at their leases and determined that there were other ways that tenant was violating the lease, and they've noticed the termination of the lease, and they've worked out agreements for those tenants who are illegally selling cannabis, but maybe doing something else to violate the terms of the lease. They've agreed to vacate, and we have had that happen. And as I said, the first letter that we sent informing a landlord about a tenant, about community complaints, is in your area, 301 West 55, and we've been working with that landlord to try to come up with ways of evicting. But when we don't have the evidence, that's harder to do. But we are working very hard at that. We're very willing to take information from the community. And if that can match up with investigations we have going on, we're more than willing to order the landlords to evict those tenants.
Thank you very much. By the way, we've been joined by State Senator Brad Hoylman, and we're going to go to Christine Gorman from West 55th Street Block Association, and then end with Captain Williams, and then get some questions. Yes, Christine.
Hi. So steam is coming out of my ears. You may not be able to see it.
I did.
We've given you plenty of evidence, but let me just, my role here is to give a timeline of the efforts of the West 55th Street Block Association with respect to the unlicensed cannabis store at 301 West 55th. I want to preface my remarks by saying I used to teach high school, and occasionally I would get students who had creative excuses for why they didn't do their homework. This all falls under the dog ate my homework. In this instance, I have heard the governor ate my homework, not in this Zoom call, but because then Governor Cuomo slow walked the regulations. This is why I have heard, who could have anticipated that there would be a problem? Hello, we all did. Oh yes, the community, we want to hear from the community, but you don't listen to the community. We have been lied to. We have been told it's NYPD's issue. It's the DA's issue. It's OCM's issue. You know, stop pissing on my boots and calling it a rainstorm. So here's the timeline. In July 31st of 2022, that's almost a year ago now, the West 55th Street Block Association residents learned from workers working inside the old Simon Key shop at 301 West 55th Street that a cannabis shop would soon be opening up there. We contacted the landlord's office, Montgomery Trading. We contacted Council Member Eric Botcher's office. We contacted Linda Rosenthal's office. At that time, those were the people involved. District lines have changed, but it's still Eric and Tony Simone as the assembly member until January. Then it will be Gail Brewer. The tenant of the shop at 301 West 55th is one Rashid Nasher from Queens Village. A stop work order was issued against the store back in August. In September, residents observed work being done in the store. City Council member Eric Botcher's then chief of staff asked the Department of Buildings to conduct an inspection on why work was being done despite a stop work order being put in place. The then chief of staff also confirmed that 301 would not be eligible to receive a license to sell tobacco or vaping products because those were full up in this area. The chief of staff also forcefully informed both the owner and landlord. He said that the shop would never get a license to sell cannabis. The shop stays shut for all this time. December 13, 2022, Council Member Gail Brewer and Assembly Member Linda Rosenthal hold a town hall at John Jay about unlicensed shops. January 18 of this year, Council Member Gail Brewer holds a hearing on proliferation of unlicensed shops as chair of the Investigations Committee in conjunction with other city council members. February 1 of this year, Community Board 4 conducts a public hearing on the regulations. February 24 of this year, over the weekend, we on the street observe workers erecting an exotics town convenience store sign over the shop at 301 West 55. The Block Association immediately files a complaint because the sign is 40 square feet and set up to be illuminated is not permitted. And I can give you complaint information. April 18th of this year, the Department of Buildings issues an ECB violation. I can give you the number, which the shop owner promptly tears down. They've since been found in violation when the magnificent sum of $625 has been assessed, which still has not been paid. You've heard about the fire on April 27th that not only destroyed the unlicensed shop on West 52nd, but also put all of those tenants out of their home, and the store next door, the Korean store, still has not been able to reopen. This fire probably was started by the butane gas lighters that were kept in that shop. May 4th, 2023, the Exotics Town convenience store opens its doors to paying customers. They are selling flavored nicotine products, which are illegal in New York City. Photos of said products are sent to all involved, the authorities involved. They are also selling THC gummy bears, and they assured a customer that cannabis products would be coming soon. Subsequent research showed that the stop work order that had been issued against the shop in September of 2022 was lifted in February. May 8th, the shop owner adds neon signs to the interior depicting a hand with a smoking joint and the words Vice City. Gee, I wonder what they're selling. May 8th, local elected officials attend the monthly meeting of the West 55th Street Block Association. Senator Hoylman Seagal promises to coordinate with the Office of Cannabis Management. Right away, Councilmember Brewer sends a letter to the Commissioner of Department of Consumer and Worker Protection demanding action on the sale of flavored tobacco and nicotine products. May 30th, we hear about these emergency regulations that OCM passes. June 15th, Gail Brewer's office informs the Block Association that 2 violations were issued by the Department of Worker and Consumer Protection for the unlicensed cannabis shop at 301 West 55. Hearings are set for July 18 and July 25 for electronic cigarette dealer license, not having one, and the other was for a non-food retail violation. Mid-June, the Exotics Town Convenience Store sign comes down. The shop remains open. July 3rd, a representative of the District Attorney's Office informs the Block Association that efforts to evict the unlicensed cannabis shop at 301 West 55 have, quote, hit a snag, unquote, because the shop owner claims that he is no longer selling cannabis. That evening, a resident of West 55th Street purchases 2 marijuana blunts for $20 cash from the shop. The photos of the blunts, which are found in a transparent vial labeled Stimsy 40s Premium Indoor Cannabis Infused Blunt Multipack, net weight 2.5 grams, Purple Punch containing 40.12% THC, manufactured by Ironworks Collective. These photos are sent to the District Attorney's Office and the elected officials. July 9th, West 55th Street resident reports that marijuana flowers are sold to an underage girl sometime between 8:30 a.m. and 9:15 a.m. July 10th, a moped motorbike delivery person was observed going into the unlicensed cannabis shop at 301 West 55th Street, which raises the question of whether the shop owner is expanding his business to delivering unlicensed cannabis to people's homes. July 17th, a female was photographed injecting herself in the afternoon in front of the unlicensed cannabis store at 301 West 55th. She then wandered into the street where she fell down after being struck by a moped, e-bike, motorbike, or some such. At least 2 residents of the block call 911 since she may have been injured. After 10 minutes, she wanders off to 8th Avenue, and sometime later, an ambulance shows up. But of course, she is gone. July 18th, the owner of 11 unlicensed cannabis shops agrees to pay more than $400,000 in fines, as we've learned, in a deal with the Manhattan District Attorney. However, the shops are allowed to remain open as long as they promise not to sell cannabis anymore. July 19th today, the unlicensed shop at 301 West 55 remains open and is still selling unlicensed cannabis to people who come by. That's the end of my timeline.
I think that it is clear that our neighborhood is diligent, specific, and keeps pretty solid records. And our level of frustration is rather unbelievable. But I want to move, thank you, Christine, very much for that. I want to move to Captain Williams on the NYPD's role as part of the new law from June 7th, because in fact, now local police can be brought into the enforcement process as part of it. Captain Williams.
Evening, everybody. Thank you. So to start, there's approximately across the whole city of New York, about 17 100 of these smoke shops. And to date, our enforcement, we have conducted 91 search warrants and effected 158 arrests. And like the district attorney said, Michael, for nuisance abatement cases, we have submitted over 300, actually 308 of those shops submitted for nuisance abatement. 23 stores have been served already, 5 has been closed. 6 tenants have left on their own once you start nuisance abatement process. 2 of these tenants had agreed to just follow the law, and there's tenant litigation. So like you said, the problem is with these cases that go to nuisance abatement, once we do our buys or once we do our operations, we put a package together, we give it to our law department. Our law department takes it to civil litigation to close these shops down. So we are actively going after these locations. And our priority, how we prioritize these shops, is through 311, 911 complaints, how close they are to schools, which is a big priority for us, community complaints, forums such as this, ADA cards, if people get sick from ingesting these products, that's the store we'll go after, and any other type of observations from just being out in the streets. So that's how the NYPD is actively combating these illegal smoke shops.
I just want to note for our panel participants that our neighborhood health kitchen is well aware and familiar with the nuisance abatement law. It was used to close massage parlors throughout our district in the 1980s, drug activity and drug storefronts, and cart depots for hot dog carts that were storing propane in residential buildings. This was used through something called the Mayor's Office of Midtown Enforcement that coordinated efforts all together. And one of the things that we're going to ask you very much as the various agencies are working, that you need to coordinate among each other. And I'm going to ask Jason first and then go to our elected officials. To what degree is OCM providing that coordination among the various agencies to concentrate? Because we found that when it worked is when everyone sat in the same room and talked about, we have these 11, or we have this 6 over here, we have these people here. And by the way, in the back rooms of these 4 shops, there's a whole other kind of drug activity happening that has nothing to do with cannabis whatsoever, or there's money laundering happening. Our NYPD precincts, Midtown North, Midtown South, the 10th, the 13th, have given us lots of direct information that there's a lot of other illegal activity well beyond the unlicensed shop itself that is going on. So Jason, to you, we're going to elected officials.
Yeah, so I would say for the better part of 2 years, we've been engaging, obviously with the Manhattan DA's office, we've had consistent engagement, local law enforcement as well. Anytime we actually are going to do a raid, we notify local law enforcement to make sure that if they do want to take part, because it's us, and then it's the Department of Tax and Finance. We have been in coordination with the Sheriff's Department consistently throughout this process. I do agree that this is, again, like I said, this is a all hands on deck sort of situation. So Christine, I see the steam, and I understand your frustration, of course, but this is, if you actually, and I'll just go into a little bit of history if you don't mind, if you go back to alcohol prohibition and when it ended, there's a similar process that has happened in a similar history. This is a once in a multi-generational time. So this is a once in a multi-generational time. This is
It ain't pleasant to live through, Jason. It's not pleasant to live through.
I understand, and you know what? We're all living through it too. I go and work, but I still come home. I still have kids, and I totally understand what is going on here. So we're all living through it, right? And trust me, I want our licensees to be as successful as possible. That's why I joined this agency. Honestly, it wasn't to really do a whole lot of enforcement, to be honest. And just to talk about the SLA, which this is modeled after, the SLA works with the NYPD, of course, but it's the NYPD that actually goes in to close down the shop. For us, we are actually the ones. This is the first agency where we're actually going in to close down the shop. So I think this has to be all hands on deck because our process, the law that was passed, is a little lengthy. Obviously, we're conducting raids every single day and we're increasing our staff on our enforcement team to cover more ground. But we've talked about the new law. We can always talk about the old law as well. While we got rid of a lot of the offenses, there are still offenses on the books that you can enforce, like everything from 22.5 to 222.45, whether it's a sale to a minor, which is still a felony, which is having more than 5 to 10 pounds, which is a Class E felony and a Class D felony. So there are still laws on the books, and we do know that other local law enforcement across the state do buy bus, and they are going in to try to keep track and keep records of this so that when we do partner up, that we can share that information. But Joe, I agree with you. I think in order to tackle this in the fastest way possible, we need NYPD. It's got to be OCM, Department of Tax and Finance. It's got to be the local DA's office. And I think we always have consistently tried to work with everybody. And I think now that we have that law passed and we have no new powers that we can enforce, it would be great if we could all sit at the table. And I know that my colleague, the head of enforcement, Dan Hackney, which I'm sure most of you have spoken with, he's been doing that work very digitally.
We're going to go to our electeds and then come back to this issue. We've asked some member Simone to speak first because he has to be at another meeting. If Billy can bring Tony over, please.
Yes, I see 2 listings for Tony. I'm going to promote both. So apologies if.
Okay. Tony, go ahead. You're on mute, and do you have the right? We have the right Tony. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thank you to HKNC for hosting this. I hear everyone's frustration. I'm just as frustrated. I can tell you since this problem has, since I've taken office, I would say we email and call OCM almost every day about illegal cannabis shops. So Christine, I hear you. I think all of the electeds hear you. And clearly, there's a lot more to do. And the law wasn't passed too long ago. And the frustration I have, and this is talking to the governor's office, is they described it as like getting a parking ticket, which really annoyed me. And I think the DA's office, others alluded to this. You see an illegal shop, you have to prove that they're selling illegal cannabis. They get a ticket. It's a minimal amount. It's not the amount I wish it was from the start. They go to court. The judge has to see it. There's this timeline between that and actually, I had spoken to the governor's representative and said, I want, a certain store padlocked. We know they're selling to kids, which is unacceptable. The rollout was a disaster. No disrespect to OCM. There was a void that was filled. There's empty storefronts. And as we all know, the illegal cannabis shops have brought other illegal activity because it's a cash business, which has created a huge problem throughout the district. And every other elected will agree, not just in Hell's Kitchen, in Chelsea as well, but it's been pretty bad in most of Hell's Kitchen. I walk up and down 10th Avenue, 9th Avenue. There's another guy now has his boombox on. So we're all frustrated. And I hope that in this process, maybe we even have to address with new legislation on enforcement, we can be able to promote the legal stores to offset the illegal stores. Because I know it's very anecdotal. Some of the folks I know who've reached out to our office constituents in Chelsea were using illegal shops. We've urged them not to. And now they're going to the legal stores because they feel more comfortable. They trust them more. I'm hoping the market will shift. Clearly, that's not going to solve the problem we have today overnight. The time you have enough numbers of legal shops to offset the legal market and be competitive, it's going to take some time. But I know that OCM, from talking to them, are in the training process and hiring more enforcers. I hope, I constantly give them addresses. And I want to thank HKNC and West 55th Block Association, others for sending us photos. The more proof you send us, the more I can harass, and I use the word lightly, maybe not, the governor's office when OCM doesn't respond quick enough. But I know they have a lot of shops that electeds are calling throughout the state to have them close them down. So it's going to be a problem for a while. So I know we're all impatient, but it's going to take a while to get a hand on this problem. And I'm hoping, we can even look at legislation to go after the landlords harder for actually allowing legal shops to open up in their properties, which is a whole other level I think we need to look at as well. But look, we're here to serve, so we're going to continue to send us what you see. We're going to continue to go tell the OCM office to enforce it. We're going to continue to call the governor's office when we feel they're not moving quick enough. But that's pretty much what I have to say tonight. But thank you for your work, HKNC, and keep us informed constantly. I read all your emails. I don't just have staff relay it to me to see what's happening in the neighborhood on a day-to-day basis. But thank you.
Thank you, Tony. If you bring over Senator Hoylman, please, Bill. And just to note that, we all work together in this neighborhood to deal with massage parlors, and that was about exploitation of women and men, but it was about illegal activity that centered around the massage parlors that created public safety issues in the streets constantly. And that's what we're seeing today. So no one expects, as a New Yorker, things are going to happen in 2 minutes. But at the same time, we expect coordination. So we really are asking that this coordination question becomes to the fore of how you're working together as a group and how it's being led. And since OCM has the basic authority now, and everyone is working in concert with them, we need you to work together. Without that coordination, nothing would have happened in Times Square and in Hell's Kitchen to clean up to create public safety, to solve public safety issues. Let's go. Do you have Brad? Yes, perfect. Brad.
Hi, good to see everyone. I'm at a party for a local political club in Central Park right now. So I did leave to hear all these comments, and again want to agree with Tony and thanking HK NC for that map that you provided of all the unlicensed shops. I've been in direct contact, just so you know, with Chris Alexander, the executive director, and it's really good to see Jason here. And in fact, I literally just texted Chris, the executive director of OCM, about that location and that Christine was talking about. His response in real time is that the new process is cumbersome, but he says he's on it in connection with DTF, and they've done dozens of inspections, as Jason has said, in the last week. But the first shutdowns have not yet been approved by the court, but he assures us it's coming and in the next few weeks. And he wants to be at your next meeting personally, Joe. So we'll take him up on that offer. Just to recount my own timeline also, because it's important. And again, I appreciate all the information that's been shared, but we completely agree that how deceptive these shops are to customers, dangerous to public health, cheating on taxes, undermining the equity-based, and legal cannabis rollout. And they just have little incentive to inspect IDs to ensure they're not selling to minors. I mean, they're rogue, illegal operations that are a real danger to our community. I'm really surprised that there hasn't been more reporting on people who have gotten sick or have lost, money, have bought product that is unsafe. But I'm sure that's happening. We've seen and heard about the shootings and the public safety that the life-threatening public safety that is connected to that. But last summer, a group of us wrote a letter to Mayor Adams calling for enforcement. We recently wrote another follow-up letter to Chris and OCM, urging them to take swift action. And as I said, Chris and I have been locked in a conversation for a number of months now. Just to recount what the state budget did in terms of giving authority to the State Office of Cannabis Management and Taxation. OCM can assess civil penalties according to our new law that Linda and me and Tony voted for. The fines start at $10,000 per day and they rise to $20,000 per day. Landlords who permit unlicensed shops on their premises could be on the hook for $10,000 a day in fines as well. The legislation allows OCM to conduct these inspections on a regular basis and a product. And according to the law, OCM is going to seize the product and will seek state court orders, closing orders, and removal of commercial tenants who are selling cannabis without a license. The Department of Taxation and Finance is going to, according to our bill that we passed, is going to have the power to conduct regulatory inspections of businesses selling cannabis to determine if appropriate taxes have been paid and to also be able to levy civil penalties. And there's a new tax fraud crime for businesses that fail to collect cannabis taxes. And there's also an additional $5 million for 37 new OCM staff to carry out this enforcement. So we did hear the community. We saw it with our own eyes. We've witnessed it walking up and down our blocks. You know, I represent all the way up from Christopher Street up to West 103rd. I may have the most illegal cannabis shops in any legislative district in the state. And we're glad to see some of this enforcement begin to trickle out. In June, we know that OCM and Taxation and Finance conducted nearly 40 inspections and seized 1,000 pounds of cannabis that was illegal. We've been tracking stores reported to our office. We even set up a Google page for constituents, and we've been sharing those. We know that there are 5 licensed dispensaries, of course, in Manhattan, and that there's that QR code that's supposed to be posted and allow people to know that they're getting a safe product. So that's a rundown of what, you know, I've tried to do with my colleagues who've been incredibly active on this, whether it's Councilmember Botcher or Brewer, Linda Rosenthal, Tony, and the borough president. Everyone is mightily concerned. I want to thank the DA's office too. Mike, you've been sharing information on a regular basis with us. That's been important. And we've got our work cut out for us. So, but Joe, this is really important. I think, you know, I know it's a bit of a burden on you to keep, you know, ruffling the feathers and prodding those in positions of enforcement and lawmaking to do our job. But thank you for doing that.
Thank you very much, Brad. If you can bring Eric over, who has another meeting to go to, and also to note for the folks on this call, HKNC has developed a full map of every either smoke shop or illegal cannabis seller. We'll put that up before the meeting is over. And we have sent letters to about 55 owners informing them that they are in fact having tenants who are doing illegal business in their buildings, putting them on notice they could be subject to fines and stuff. We did this prior to the June 7th law.
Joe, just a quick statement. For the elections, I don't have anywhere to go right afterwards. If they can stay on for the Q&A because some of the questions are particularly geared towards them.
Yes, Eric.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for this forum. I'll cut right to it. What I think we can add to the conversation. In June, the City Council passed legislation, Intro 1001, making it illegal for landlords to knowingly rent to tenants who are selling cannabis. And the law takes effect next week, on the 22nd. Actually, that's in a few days. And the way the law is laid out is upon the first occurrence of a tenant selling cannabis in an establishment, and that could be just one of the inspections that are happening, one of these joint inspections. The landlord will be given a notice and in order to evict the tenant. They will, if upon a second inspection, if the tenant is not evicted and if the landlord does not demonstrate that they've made every effort to do so, the first fine is $5,000. And then if there's a third occurrence.
And the fine is to the owner, right?
The fine is to the landlord. The landlord, if they can't demonstrate that they've made an effort. Third occurrence, $10,000. So this will hopefully be an effective tool to add to the toolkit for the people who are the interagency teams who are doing these inspections. I think it's really, really great that we have so many active constituents, but we can't rely on residents to be doing all this legwork. We wouldn't if it was alcohol sales, right? We don't depend on residents to tell us when someone's selling alcohol to minors. So that's the same level of, the government needs to work, and people need to know that it's just going to work and it's going to happen, and we don't have to be asked to do it. So I'm hopeful that all these tools will be effective. I'm for the state level actions, I'm particularly hopeful about the tax agency side of things, because they don't mess around. Like, that's a whole nother level of consequences. But we have to have it, we have to start seeing it working, right? So I really think it's helpful for conversations like this, getting everyone together, and we should continue to do so until we see results. And I'm hoping that will happen and happen quickly.
Thank you very much, Eric. Assembly Member Linda Rosenthal.
First thing I'd like to say is I've been here since 5:30. On the run of show, I was speaking earlier. I too have somewhere else to go. So you should follow your own run of show.
Please accept my apologies. I've been getting texts from everybody. I didn't get one from you. I apologize, Linda. I'm sorry.
Well, I wasn't texting you because I relied on the run of show and didn't want to bother you since you were presiding. You got one woman on this, now we have two. So for those who don't know me, I'm Linda Rosenthal. I'm the state assembly member for the 67th Assembly District, Upper West Side, parts of Hell's Kitchen. Thank you for hosting tonight's forum on the proliferation of unlicensed smoke shops on the West Side throughout the city. I've been on top of this issue since it began. We now see that there's development on the legalization and sale of cannabis. There are stores everywhere, and it's not just New York City. I have colleagues in Westchester, for example, who have been yelling about this as well. So it's like it started off as a free-for-all, and while that is history, it's something we should learn from for the future. Because this is not the way to introduce something as popular as marijuana, which has been sold for decades, just from cars and other places. So as everyone has said, we passed a law in June granting OCM greater enforcement power over stores that sell illegal cannabis and product, and 11,000 pounds of illicit goods worth more than 11 million have been seized. But with more than 17 smoke shops in the city, and who knows how many across the state, we need to be laser focused on rooting out the bad actors, especially those with multiple stores who are targeting and peddling products to kids. And I know from speaking with Mike Mead of the DA's office, they just nabbed and was in the papers, someone who owns many shops on the West Side. And I'm very grateful because we have been calling in, starting last year when they first surfaced, Department of Consumer Affairs, NYPD, et cetera, about the shops that this one guy owns. And I think we checked today, the store was open, but nobody was in it. I think it was locked, which I hope is what happens. And so these stores got multiple fines, multiple violations, since many of them had already been on the city's list. But even if all the product was seized, they had more product. And so they just restocked their shelves with the illegal things. They are using bright neon signs, fun packaging. There's one, the one that wasn't open today had black and gold balloons to announce their opening, as if it's, you know, a big attraction for the neighborhood, when in fact, that's one of the big things the neighborhood complains about, is the proliferation of these. And I did write to OCM some time ago about that the inspection of smoke shops, especially those that are very close to schools, they should be, you know, top of the list. And partnered with the DA to report smoke shops that had been undeterred by previous violations. Once again, I commend the DA, $400,000 in fines that they just executed the other day. And I know that if any of these stores so much as like move to touch illegal cannabis, they're gone. They will face serious prosecution. And you know, as the author of the many of the e-cigarette laws in the state, including the one banning flavored e-cigarettes and vapes, it is horrible that they continue to be sold. And the only solution is closing down these shops. The other day I sent a couple of my interns, one was 21, one was younger, they both looked young, into one of the stores, and they asked for flavored vapes. They had a whole array of them. Then they asked for cheaper ones. They had cheaper ones. Then the guy's like, I gotta go, blah, blah, blah. That the salesperson followed him out the door. It was very scary. And, you know, some of these have been sites of gun violence, etc. So I also think, though, that landlords have to be responsible. They wait for, in the past, they waited for Dwayne Reed, they waited for a bank so that they could get the most income. They are renting to these stores. Do you think they'd rent to a liquor store that didn't have a license? I don't think so. And so I think they also have to be key players in eradicating these shops. Many have had empty storefronts forever, and they think this is a way to make a quick buck. But as they will learn, they should be on the hook as well. And I know the DA is going to aggressively pursue all that. So, you know, maybe other states can learn from us as they legalize marijuana, how not to start off, but also to beware of these fraudsters who are selling product that might be tainted with, God forbid, fentanyl, but you can't rule that out these days. And that's also, we need to educate the public not to go to these stores. They're more convenient than schlepping, you know, from my neighborhood to the village. But soon there will be more legal ones accessible. So these won't be as convenient, and especially if we close them all. So that's what I'm hoping we do, and that we stay on top of it. If we have to pass new laws, we should do it. You know, we know the problem. We've given tools to target it. If they don't work properly, we should add new laws and new penalties. So thank you.
Linda, thank you very much. That was like pulls all together in a lot of passion there, because I want to note, exactly Linda said, Hell's Kitchen Families, one of our constituent organizations, has constantly made complaints about a couple of locations immediately adjacent to schools, and they are truly promoting to kids walking by. And this is something that was never intended in legislation whatsoever. And we really have to deal with this. And we will give you those locations. We give them NYPD already. And in terms of our list of the main ones that need to be closed, those need to be targeted first. We have a lot of questions that came in the Q&A. Travis, do you want to go through some of them?
Sure, Joe. So there are quite a few questions that are directed towards the electeds. And I'll try to lump them together here. So one of the questions seemed to be, now that we know that we have this free for all, and this was the unintended consequence of it all, what plans are in place to better screen for future cannabis dispensary shop owners? And also, was there a state-by-state analysis of states that actually had legalized marijuana in place prior to this legislation going through?
I believe that's probably a question for me, right, Travis?
Yeah.
Okay, so first off, as far as screening future applicants and awarding licenses, I want to reiterate that none of these shops are legal. So we did not, anytime that we have an application open, there is, obviously we try to make the process as less onerous on the applicant as possible, but there's a lot of paperwork that has to go through for this, right? So we screen folks very intentionally, very diligently. So these shops, again, they're not licensed. We have 20 across the state, and none of these shops you reference are our licensees. I want to be very clear on that. Our policy department, of course, did a state-by-state analysis. New York City is very distinct in a lot of ways. If you were born and raised here, you know that we are the center of the country in a lot of ways. We lead in a lot of ways, but this is something that a lot of other states, most states right now, have some form of legalization or medical cannabis. So of course, we were not the first state to do it. And we did do a state-by-state analysis. And we're just dealing with different circumstances, different population densities here. And as actually a lot of people pointed out, we have a lot of vacancies. There are a huge amount, I mean, not just in Hell's Kitchen.
Retail vacancies.
Yeah, of course, but we don't have any commercial vacancy control. We don't have any commercial rent control. There's nothing on the books for that. So there are places, not just in Hell's Kitchen, but also on Atlantic Avenue, for example, in Brooklyn, where there are multiple storefronts that are open. So I will state that. I also just want to comment that, and I'm sure I would be remiss if I didn't do this. We don't advise anybody to send their friends, their staff, etc., into any of these illegal shops. As we do raids, we are recovering things other than cannabis. We've had situations that I cannot detail that have put our enforcement people in danger. So just like I think there was a mention of someone being followed out the store, that this is not a job for non-law enforcement. I would not go in myself and do like a sort of faux buy bust. So just want to make that very clear that we don't advise anybody to take it upon themselves. If you do want to do a civic sort of what you feel your civic duty is, we would love all of the lists that you've compiled. Joe, I think we can speak afterwards. If I keep hearing of a map, so I would love to see that map. I would love to have that information. I can pass that off to Dan Hackney at enforcement. Most likely, since we've been conducting these inspections for the better part of 2 years without the necessary powers to actually enforce, we have these shops on the list, but we're not denying that there are shops that are popping up all the time, like this new shop that came with the gold and black balloons. So any type of information that can be passed to us, I will take on to enforcement, and we will deal with it appropriately.
I would also suggest that your public education campaign has to change. The majority of the public believe these are the licensed cannabis shops.
Right.
There is no question about that. On your website, in your public information, you need to begin to publish, these are unlicensed cannabis shops. You need to put information out there. In your district, you do not have a single licensed shop. The number of conversations I've had with members of the public about this is unbelievable, because they truly believe this is what everyone approved. And we know it's not. There's no guards, there's no signs, there's no QR
Right.
code.
It's not operating within the rules and regulations that,
Right,
that we
but no one knows that. So, you
understand.
know.
So Joe, I
how to
think
get
that's
that
a good
out there
idea.
publicly, all
Joe,
right?
I think that's a good idea. I think I can bring that idea back to at least highlight something on our website. I can say in terms of public education, you know, while this is a different part of public education, again, we've had to go around the state. We have a lot of folks traveling every day to educate people on the licensing opportunities, et cetera. But yes, on that side of things, I think that's an idea I can actually bring back to the agency. And, you know, I'll let you know if we can actually.
And something as simple as, we have community districts in our city, right? 59 community districts. List the community districts and just put no licensed shops in your district yet. So it's clear these are not licensed businesses and you're doing something at your own risk.
Joe, I think that's
Additionally, Joe,
a good idea, and I'm going to bring that back.
Additionally, Joe, I would suggest that campaign should also include ways for the public to identify how a shop is an illegally operating shop.
That I can comment on, because that is, well, obviously most I can comment on. So we do have a Why Buy Legal campaign where we have been to multiple places throughout the state, educating people on how to identify a shop. For example, the QR code that's on the front door, you can actually go and scan it. It goes to cannabis.ny.gov. So we have done a lot of those efforts. And we have gone out to communities in Binghamton, not just here in New York City. We had a number of stops in Lower East Side, et cetera, where we were going out on our Why Buy Legal campaign to educate people on how to identify a legal shop versus illegal shop. I will say, we all know it's hard to put people in the seats. And I will say that, you know, I think now that we're communicating now that all of the events we have are posted on our social media, they're posted on the website. We have a public housing tour where we educate people on the jobs and opportunities other than the licenses being issued. I think we all know there's going to be more jobs and careers developed out of this market than there are licenses issued. We have the Why Buy Legal campaign as well. So I think it would be great if we could stay in touch a little bit more and we could drive some people to these events, because we do a lot of outreach. But again, we're about half of the agency we should be. We are a new agency. I think we have about 160 folks at this point. We should have over 300. So yeah, I would love to stay in touch and talk about those educational opportunities.
We had a few more questions. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so next question, I guess it was more so geared towards Eric. Of the legislation that has been proposed, how soon can we expect that legislation to come into effect to impact what we're seeing?
I believe it's next week, Eric, right? You're on mute. You're on mute.
On the 22nd of July.
So effective
On
the 22nd.
Yeah.
Jason, you mentioned that the illegal shops have folks that have ready-made income to be able to open up the shops and set up shop.
Mm-hmm.
Is the $20,000 fine sufficient enough to serve as a deterrent, because these people are already coming in with the financial means to be able to set up the shops?
I think consistently 10 to 20K and having to pay that consistently, yes, is a big fine. I can tell you that we really wanted more, and that's what we could get. So we wanted the fines to be higher, and through the negotiation process, that's where we landed on. We landed on to start at 10 and then increase up to 20. I'm gonna say this as well. When there are more readily available shops that are legal, and that is also what's gonna combat this illegal market, because I think, Travis, you said that there was a hole that was filled, right? So a lot of the times, especially when you put social equity first and you're trying to license people that have had convictions, that have business experience, and you're trying to center folks before you bring in the large corporations, et cetera, right? Because we've made this market to be a small business market. It's a little slower than just opening up the doors and allowing everybody to apply and having your major corporations run all of the shops in the city and having basically five corporations just run the whole market. We're trying to design a market that is a fair one and that really helps the people that were impacted by cannabis prohibition. So I do believe we have 20 shops statewide right now. We need a lot more than that. By the end of this, we should have a few thousand. And you know, I think when you have something readily available, I'm in Brooklyn. We were sued here. We were enjoined here. There is no dispensary here because we couldn't open one for a while, right? Now we won that lawsuit, so there will be dispensaries in Brooklyn. If I'm in Crown Heights, for me to be able to go to a legal dispensary in which I do consume, I have to go to Manhattan, or excuse me, I go to Queens to Good Grades, right? To the shop, the legal shop, Good Grades. But unfortunately, I think, Joe, as you pointed out, people are going to go to what is really ready and available, right? And people don't understand quite yet what's legal and what's not. And it's our job to educate folks. And we are doing, I'm telling you, we work 10 to 12-hour days in this agency. We don't take this lightly. And I think as we, work to open up more stores, we had a board meeting today where we licensed over 200 card licensees that will be opening up shops. I think once we have more shops and at the same time are enforcing the new laws and working with NYPD and the Manhattan DA's office, et cetera, I think we're going to be able to tackle this problem.
So
I have a question. I want to jump in here.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you, Christine, sorry.
Jason, let's be
No.
real. The unlicensed shops are selling at a price point that's below the licensed shops. Simple economics will tell you that it's more likely that the licensed shops will be put out of business before we get rid of the unlicensed shops.
I will
Christine,
tell
you
you
beat me
that
to the question.
well, I'm gonna answer the question. I disagree with you, Christine. Of course, we don't need $25 ACE on each corner. That doesn't the market no good, and does our legal licensees no way to make that money. At the same time, if there are readily available shops with lab tested product, I can tell you as a consumer, I want to go to the shop where there aren't high amount of metals in the cannabis, where it's tested, where it is safer to consume.
And yet we already heard from Oregon, which apparently you didn't pay attention to, even their regulated cannabis is testing positive for arsenic and they had to recall it. So you are
That's
not
in Oregon. That's not something that has actually happened here yet. You're anticipating something that hasn't happened. And
But-
we have many people on our staff that work diligently to make sure that we had the right rules and regulations to where that product is tested and that it's safe. So I'm saying that I think people rather support, and especially in a community, a lot of these communities, the dispensary owners are going to potentially be people that you grew up with or that are from the neighborhood.
not talking about
I'd
the
rather support a legal business than one
She
that's,
wasn't talking about the legal, she's talking about the illegal folks.
I understand. And I'm saying to you as a community member that
You-
knows the program, I'd rather go personally.
You
to
are-
this.
Listen, you are the lead agency. You are now tasked with enforcement. You are not tasked with opening up more shops. You are tasked with enforcement
That's
now.
not true, ma'am. Ma'am, we are an agency
You're
that was
tasked with
initially
both. You're tasked with both.
with licensing. That is actually our primary
Enforce-
duty. We've taken on enforcement because of the proliferation of shops, and we've taken it on because we've had to.
Don't have to do.
Christine, we can't hear you. Start again, please.
And also, I like if we could just, have a good, I'm fine with being here and answering any questions. I'm gonna let you speak, but let's speak to each other respectfully.
And what I am respectfully telling you is what you have told us is that in addition to licensing, you are now tasked with enforcement.
That's correct, ma'am.
Five licensed shops in Manhattan, 1,700 unlicensed shops across the city. Where is the enforcement?
We just got the law that was passed. We're doing inspections and raids every day. So you might not see it, but that's what we're doing.
People. And who can we thank for this? What shall we say? Free for all screw up.
I guess
I understand you're
want to say,
frustrated.
yeah,
Joe,
Jason, let me just break in.
I understand you're frustrated and I hear it, and I am taking every idea that I hear right back to the agency.
And I just want to note that we had lots of comments in the Q&A specifically stating, why did we not plan in advance? Why was the agency not staffed in advance? We know for a fact that you need to be properly staffed. There's not even a question on that, right? On every part of it. But the idea that
you've worked in state government, staffing is, if you worked in state government, we hire civil service, we hire at-will employees. I personally am an at-will employee. Took 4 months to hire me. So it's not as easy if you worked in state or city government. It's a little harder in the state to just hire a bunch of folks. You have to interview them, you got to train them. So we are a new agency. And again, we are every day. I just hired someone the other day. So we're building the plane while we're flying it, unfortunately.
I think the frustration that's coming through in the comments is the fact that you've been tasked with building the plane and flying at the same time, instead of the legislators taking the time to actually build the plane before they legalized marijuana. And I think that was the bigger issue that's being conveyed, is that there were no specs in place beforehand. I also like to say, Jason, that you might be a sophisticated consumer, but the vast majority of folks are not sophisticated enough to distinguish between a legalized shop and an illegal one. And they're going to operate more so out of convenience and economic frugality, right? And so if a legal shop next door to me is cheaper than going to the legal one, and the legal one's also further away, I'm going to go to the illegal, cheaper shop. That is just human nature. Captain Williams, there was a question about enforcement. And I'll use their wording. I understand a straightforward way to close a shop is to bust them for selling to minors. Why can't the NYPD have minors go into shops with a camera and buy the substance, and therefore we can shut down the shop?
I think the broader question is just the idea of buy and bust, which was done for decades for illegal things.
We can do a buy and bust, but we buy and bust that don't stop the store from selling. So that's why we're taking the approach of nuisance abatement. So we buy and bust, you get locked up, you're eligible for a disappearance ticket where you can come out the same day and that person can go back and now sell tomorrow. So that's why we're doing it this way, where we can shut the store down completely, take the license so they can't reopen back up.
But if you did the buys, doesn't that give both the DA and OCM a number of buys to note that there's illegal sales happening?
Yeah, so we do 3 buys to start the nuisance abatement process.
Gotcha. You're right.
We also are doing undercover work on the back end of things. Like you said, there's illegal stuff going on in the back. So there are investigations going on as well that the public is not going to see, but they are happening.
We're over our time, but I want to say first that I'm glad we got into a heated part of the debate because we've been also polite throughout the whole discussion. It's, we are New Yorkers, guys, after all. Let's say what we say, right? And
yes, sir.
I think it's the right thing that we are telling you how we are experiencing life every day, right? And we are on the west side of Manhattan. We're in Hell's Kitchen, we're in Chelsea, we're in the Garment Center and Nomad, and these shops have added to a remarkable change in the feeling of public safety on the streets. And I want to bring this back to this over and over and over. we lived in 2019 pre-COVID, and we had a neighborhoods that were very safe and very well managed and ordered. And now it is a contribution, the illegal cannabis shops, the unhoused, untreated, mentally ill, the general disorder in the street that people feel. It is not a pleasant thing to live in our city right now. And Travis frequently says, you know, he is a 6-foot guy who feels very menaced sometimes walking down the street, which is, you know, pretty remarkable.
I don't know about minutes, but
Not so happy, right? So you are hearing from representatives, and we represent a great number of associations, block associations and organizations that are living through this change in our city. This is one aspect. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming here and talking directly, specifically. Eric, for example, on the change in the law. Jason, just your slideshow was great to lay it out there. But the more we can get the public to understand that these illegal shops are exactly that, unlicensed and illegal, and have a lot of other things happening, that helps us, because truthfully, all we do is explain to people, no, this is not the New York State cannabis law. This is not what they meant to have flashing neon, Hell's Kitchen clouds, buy your gummies here now. And literally at Halloween, one shop was handing out to the kids, okay? So thank you for participating tonight. And yes, we will stay in touch, and thank also Manhattan DA's office for coming. You've been our partners for a long time now, and all of our elected officials. We really appreciate it. And of course, Central, the NYPD that we worked with for decades and decades on these kind of issues. They come and they go. And as in this, we're still New Yorkers and we're still here. So we're not going anywhere.
Joe, can I just ask you something really quick? Can I ask everybody something? Just really quick. When we do have a legal dispensary in Hell's Kitchen, will everybody on this call come to support? So we wonder.
Yeah.
Well,
I have been to legal
I'm going to send
dispensaries.
the invite to Christine. I'm going to send it to you. I would love to
Jason,
meet.
I have been to legal dispensaries in other states, and it was like going to an Apple store.
There we
Because
go.
it was secure, it was thoughtful, and there
That's
were
right.
normal, everyday people not coming at you like crazies,
So we're
okay?
going to send the invite to everybody when we do have a legal dispensary within Hell's.
Jason, I will 100% attend if it's in Hell's Kitchen, particularly if it's Black owned.
Well, Travis, most of the dispensaries have been Black and brown owned, or serving Black and brown populations, marginalized populations that need housing, et cetera, like described at the card. So I'll let you know, Travis.
Unfortunately, I can't support.
Catherine, you can't come by? You can't come?
I can come by, I can come by.
No. We need you here too. We need you here too. Just to lighten the mood, everybody. I will send out an invite. Thank you, Joe, for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
I will,
really appreciate it.
when you shut down the unlicensed shops.
Yes, ma'am, Christine. Yes, ma'am. I hear you.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. But I feel like I've been understood to death, and I'm not having it anymore.
I'm just giving, I don't know what else to say to you, but yes, we're gonna try our best, and I'm gonna take all the information here that came from Joe and Travis and yourself, and I'm gonna bring it back to OCM.
And we will send you our maps, our
Thank you.
letters. We have a good solid paper trail and a lot of information that will help you. Right?
That will be very helpful. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, and thanks to all the public for attending tonight. Really appreciate it. Thank you, guys.